All right. Welcome in, everybody. Thanks for watching and listening. We have a very special guest today. I'm excited. One of my favorite actors. We've just been talking here before we hit record, Gregory Sporleder, about so many projects that he has done. I mean, I could just read off his film and televisionography: A League of Their Own, Twister, Never Been Kissed, The Rock. I mean, the list goes on and on. Just like a really cool career. And I'm thankful that he said yes to our conversation, even a little house on the prairie. I mean, thanks for your time. It's great to meet you.
It's funny to hear all those.
Yeah, it's probably weird to hear
the wide variety.
Yeah, I mean, when you do interviews like this and people list off the things that you've done, have you done more and forgotten more than you remember just because you've been at this for so long?
That's so funny. I've been lucky to have, like, I have a really odd memory. I'm extremely dyslexic. It's so funny. We're a minute and a half in. I've already confessed to my dyslexia. But I shout out to all the dyslexics out there. You know,
shout out.
Function differently, and I was lucky eventually to find out that I remember stories. Like, I can remember just the stories of almost my whole life as a story. And so I was lucky. I'm lucky in that way. And so I remember almost all the movies. You know, I can remember the whole thing. And also, you know, you don't really, at least I never really thought, you know, you start off and you don't really think you're ever going to be in the movies. You don't ever really think, you know, I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, and I could already roof a house like in high school. So my mom was an artist, and she says, you should go to art school. You know, one of us is going to break through. And both my parents were social workers, and so they really convinced me to go to art school. And
that's crazy. I mean, but I get it. Like, when you talk to people about your career, like,
just so you know, this is the first time I've ever talked about it. This is the first podcast I've ever been on.
I know. That's what I'm saying. Like, I was doing my research and looking to see if you've done interviews, and this, you see my cat in the background. You haven't done any interviews. Did you ever do studio press for any of the films that you worked on? Or
no, you know, I never really had that publicist. I didn't get a publicist. Like, for me, it was all just like, when it was really going, you would go to, you go to auditions all the time. So you're always going to the next audition. And I had a knack, you know, I studied in Chicago. I went to theater school in St. Louis and then got kicked out. And then I went to the Eugene O'Neill Theater Center, this program in Connecticut, for one semester. And I thought, well, that'll be my last stab at it to see if I can, you know, if I can break through. And the college I went to in Missouri, they kicked me out. They didn't think I was good enough, you know. And so I was like, well, I'm just going to see, because I thought I was okay and I really liked it. I was fearless. And then at this program in Connecticut, who do I meet but Jeremy Piven?
Okay.
And, you know, and he was, and as soon as I met him, I thought, wow, I've been doing the whole thing wrong. And we became like best friends. Like, he introduced me to my wife and came to my wedding, and he's
a great guy. We had him on for a movie that last year it was for a feature film that he wrote and directed and starred in. About the tap dancer.
Look, here's his sister right here. His sister's in a play. Here's Shira and I in a play in Chicago in 1987.
Yeah, that's cool. He was really funny. He just, I mean, people know him from a lot of things, but his role as Ari on Entourage is probably the one thing. But it's funny because in our conversation, there was a lot of that impeding through, which is really funny. But that's crazy. So you meet him, and he says, come to Chicago
and study with my parents. I said, dude, I don't have any more money. Like, I already borrowed. I'll be paying probably this off for the rest of my life. Because my parents, I'll tell them not to charge you. I said, I can't. And I swear to God, I owe it all to the Pivens, and then of course the neighbors down around the corner were the Cusacks, and
Okay.
I became friends with the Cusack family as well. We all lived together. In fact, I used to live with John
Crazy.
Cusack and Jeremy Piven and a guy named Steve Pink, who's a pretty famous director, and then DVD Vincentis, who's another big TV guy too. And we were all, I mean, dude, those are just the guys that sort of made a living. There were hundreds of the most incredible artists. I couldn't believe it. I mean, I'm surprised I left, but I was sick of waiting tables and I started to make a living. But Chicago, during when I lived there, I lived there 7 years, and I don't have a single bad thing to say about my experiences. It was like a dream. So I came out into LA. I had already lived a dream that I never even knew existed. I thought, John created this theater company, and Tim Robbins slept on my couch to teach John how to direct his style. And then he's like, oh yeah, my girlfriend is coming by, and Susan Sarandon came to our house, and
Jeez.
And I knew who she was, but I was like, well, what movie you just finished making a movie? What's it called? Oh, Bull Durham. I said, oh, I'll keep my eye out for it, But these guys were like, John, and especially Tim, were so humble, and they were great artists. Like, John turned out, like, I met John, he was younger than me, and he was like, yeah, we were at like a bar. I held John Cusack's 21st birthday at mine and Jeremy's apartment. We got kicked out the next day because it was so wild. But when I first met John, he wasn't even 21, and we were sitting in this bar, and a commercial, and he never talked about any of that. This is before even videos were out, so I didn't know I knew he had been in some movies, but we were just being friendly. So he said something about Pretty in Pink, and I said, wow, man, you almost got in Pretty in Pink. He goes, yeah, they wanted me to be in it, to play Ducky. I said, really? I said, that's such a huge hit. He goes, yeah, they offered me $1 million. And I was like, wait, what? Wait, you got offered $1 million to be in a movie with that, So yeah, man. I said, well, why didn't you do it? He says, well, this safari set up for Africa, and I've always wanted to go to Africa. And so that was like, I said, I hope I stay friends with you forever, because I've never known anyone to go on a safari in Africa or turn down $1 million, and you're going to start a theater company, and I'm buying you beer. I mean, it was that guy was incredible, and he was really inspired by Tim, who the actors gang out here, they had started this theater company, and so when they were in that Sure Thing, that movie, that's one of Tim's earliest roles, and he met John, and then John came out to LA and did a workshop with the actors gang. And he just loved it so much. And then he called Piven and said, you got to come see this style of theater. Because they all grew up doing, Jeremy's mom and dad may they rest in peace, legendary theater gods.
Yeah, the Piven
but so
theater.
Kind and funny and generous, so generous. The kindest and most generous. And so that's how I started. And I just couldn't do. I helped build the back of Jeremy's dad's porch. I saw, come on, that kind of stuff. He'd be like, Spoonie, do you know how to put stairs in? The next thing I'm like helping. They were just, it was really just dreamy over there. And so I'm so grateful and have really great fond memories. And like I said, he introduced me to my wife. I've been married 25 years, and so he came to my wedding, and wish we were all closer, but that happens,
Yeah, I mean, everybody has lives, families, careers, but like the fact that, like, it's interesting for me, as I was telling you, like, I do this mostly because I just love to hear the stories, and like, to you, these people are your peers that you started with and worked with, but for me, it's people I've watched on the screen, like you included, be in all these different projects. But like the fact that some of these people were like surfing on your couch, it's just such a wild story to hear. Like, it's, and the fact that,
and again, it's before,
help each other out.
It was before Blockbuster, and I wasn't a big movie kid growing up. I wasn't obsessed with movies hardly at all. Like I liked the movies that I liked, and sometimes I would go see them more than once. Like I loved them differently. I never, and I didn't study film, or, I didn't have that. It was all, I was born an artist. So it was always like, I studied a lot of screenwriting now. That you kind of have to with that, but everything else was sort of a personal thing as an artist. So, and that's what a lot of these folks were, especially in Chicago. Like our whole theater company, it was just Tim Robbins' sister was in our company, and it's just incredible people. So it was a real tribal. And then Dave Schwimmer, his theater company, they came out of Northwestern at the same time. So we would go see their shows, the Looking Glass Theater in Chicago. And now they're like, there's big as Steppenwolf. And we were kind of like the punk rockers. We would rent a space, Cusack would rent the space, and we put on our makeup and put on these shows. And we always had rocking bands, like the Commedia. We always had the greatest musicians, and they would mark the plays. And so I didn't even know what Commedia was until John started talking about it, and then Tim came and taught it to us, and it was like a dream come true for me. It was something like I eventually worked my way up to becoming one of the main actors of the group, and just loved it to death. In fact, when I first moved out here, Bill Cusack was John's brother, and he and I were in the group. We were in it the most consistently, like the first 6 or 7 shows and all the rehearsals. We were really there were lots of us too, but some people would have other jobs and this and that and this and that. But when we first moved out here, my first year here was so challenging and up and down that I finally ran out of money, and I thought, man, why put up with this? I'm gonna go back to Chicago where I'm loved, And, and Piven said, you know what? Let's do a 2-man show. We'll do a 2-man show with all just the Commedia's greatest hits, which are kind of like watching human cartoons. You're watching Looney Tunes. And we had musicians and sound effects. And then Jeremy got a part in I forget which one it was, with Cuba, and he's in a camper. Anyway, we got the lead in some movie. Like, oh, And he said, well, I'll tell you what, since we were going to do this 2-man show, I'll fly Billy out, and you and Billy can be the 2-man show. And so we flew Billy out, and we rehearsed it in this garage of this apartment, and a bunch of people helped us, and we could only afford the 11 o'clock slot at the Tamarind Theater. And so we filled the house that night with friends, and it was packed, and no one had really seen our version of Commedia. And it was so successful that the theater company, through the 8 o'clock, they said, we're going to ask the 8 o'clock play to leave, and will you guys move into the 8 o'clock site? We're like, well, we can't afford it. We can't afford it. He said, you don't ever have to pay. Just keep doing that show. And it was so successful that eventually Lorne Michaels from New York called and said, I heard about this show. I'm going to fly 9 of you out. I'll fly you all out. This theater, I want to see it. So next thing you know, 9 of us, me and Bill, and then we had 7 of us that ran the show. We flew to New York and did, our 2-man show for Lorne Michaels, and he came backstage. He said, well, I don't know if I could put you on Saturday Night Live, but that was a hell of a show. And so that was probably the coolest.
Yeah. I feel like you came up in a time where there was a mysteria to the art form, like, I guess would be the best way to describe it. And so that would make sense why there wasn't a lot of even studio press for projects you were doing, because it was probably more focused on the work, and the people went to theaters, right? Like they just watched things that way, and there was whatever commercials or however they would advertise it. And then later we would go and rent it from Blockbuster. I'm 51. So like that was how things were done. Right. So, so there was a little bit of like mystery to the actor's life, but I think now people are so interested in these types of stories that you've just shared because it's so fascinating.
Well, when you go on a set, that's part of it as well. I haven't been on a set in a while, but that was always the best part, especially if there was some Chicago people around. And I tell you what, I saw. Did you interview Malkovich?
Yeah, I interviewed Malkovich. Yeah,
probably shouldn't say it, but that guy's a fucking asshole, and fuck him.
It's not really surprising. Like,
I only say it because he's a Chicago boy, and he was really disrespectful, and I didn't even ask for anything other than just to be fucking cool. Anyway, I don't want to dog out.
No, but I get it.
But sometimes. But anyway, what I was trying to say was that when you got on set, that was you couldn't wait to shoot the shit. You'd find who could tell the good stories, and then you got a Malkovich story. I got one. You go first. And then,
I mean, it was for something he was doing for Apple TV.
Oh yeah.
It was just kind of cool. Like, I didn't get to ask him about much other than what he was working on. But I definitely had some questions about Con Air. So let's talk about some of these major tentpole films that you've done. There's a lot of. Can I just round this
out? Let me just say, the only reason I said, I'm going to just say that.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Malkovich, but I also want to say that years later, I met Gary Sinise, right? And they came up together and they started to Steppenwolf Theater together. And Gary Sinise was cooler and kinder than he even appears.
Interesting.
He was so generous. My wife and I just had our baby, and he was like, "Wow," and we were at this party. I was in a movie with Owen Wilson and Morgan Freeman, and Gary Sinise was there, and he was so kind and held our baby, asked if he could hold our baby, and gave us, asked us, what we were doing, like just a Chicago guy. So I guess you can't really say it's just a Chicago guy when Gary Sinise is one version and then Malkovich is the other version. So.
Yeah, I think those stories are always funny. So you are working with these people, you're involved with them, you make your way out to LA. Like, you've already had a lot of successes in your life to this point. So you get out to LA, the first year or so is really tough. When is your first big break to be in something?
Well, what was trippy was that I got my first break was in Chicago, bro. I mean, so Cusack, we're getting ready to do. Tim is, I forget, he was in town because it was all during that first year. So Tim stayed in Chicago for 3 weeks to help our company get up and running. I had to go to work. I left St. Louis when I was 22 years old, and made a living as a waiter, and then eventually as an actor. And my parents, I didn't have any money. I always had to go to work. So I'm going to work one day, and Cusack's I was like, "Hey man, what are you doing today?" And he goes, "Well, because we were going to meet at the theater after work. After I worked to begin rehearsing it." And he goes, "Well," I said, "You do anything before we meet at rehearsal?" He goes, "Yeah, this guy's flying in town. He keeps trying to convince me to make this movie, and I keep saying no. I don't want to be in I'm not going to be in another high school movie. I'm not." The guy begged me. He's flying to town. He said he'd take me anywhere to lunch if he would just let me talk. And if he just, since I had read the script, I said, "Oh," I said, what's it called?" It's called Say Anything. And it's the guy who wrote Fast Times at Ridgemont High. I said, "Oh shit."
Oh, wow.
And he's going to buy you lunch. That sounds cool. He goes, "Yeah. So I'll see you at the theater later." And so we meet at the theater. I said, "How was your lunch?" He goes, "God damn it." He convinced me to do it. Every suggestion I made, he said he would do. And then they offered me $800,000. That's the one that you had to. And then he goes, wait. He says, "There's a scene in the movie. You know what? Let's go down to the agency tomorrow, and we'll take Piven and Pat O'Neill. And I got an idea." And so suddenly, he lets us read the scene. I said, "Oh my God, I'm going to get, this is it. I'm going to get my," and I've been in an orange juice commercial. So, and he says, "We'll go down to the agent and we'll shoot, I'll shoot it with you, and I'll show it to the director and see if he likes it. I can't promise you anything." I was like, "Dude, that just sounds," just going down there with all of us will be.
I love it.
Time. So we go down there. And again, it's back when the video cameras were on your shoulder, the big giant light, So we all go down there. We all had the same agency. There was really only one big agent in town, and Joan were their big clients, money maker. Well, and the other one was Aidan Quinn, which was Jeremy Piven's father's star student as well.
Yeah.
So we go into the conference room, and the agent's in there, and her assistant with the camera, and John's like, "Get out! I'll take it from here." He kicks him out, and we just start improvising. And Piven, you gotta understand, Piven was like a Tasmanian comedic devil. I mean,
I believe it.
He would just rip You know, I loved him and knew him well enough to just keep tossing him red meat, you know, and he would just go. And so it ends up like, it ends up, we kind of went crazy, and Cusack was just egging us on and loving it and laughing, having a good time. So I said, I got to go to work. You know, I get on the subway, the L, and I'm taking the train out to work. I'm like, God damn it, you know, that was the best shot I'll never have a better shot to be in the movie. And all we did was fucking around. And I'll be damned, like 2 days later, he's like, they're gonna not only they're gonna cast you in the movie, everything you said they want to put in the movie. So if you ever watch Say Anything and you see me start hitting the beatbox, that was my idea, and I did.
That was your idea.
Yeah,
I remember that.
And I start hitting the beatbox and dancing around, you know, and also Piven Pat starts rapping, and that was all. And it was also my idea to say, oh man, you know, I gave the line to Jeremy, you know, like, oh, I had my heart broken one time, man. That really sucks, you know. And Jeremy was like, don't you think that'd be funny if I said that? Yeah. So I gave him that line. But my point being is that, you know, I thought we blew it, and it wound up that Cameron Crowe was like, not only that, I want to put it all in the movie. And so that's how I got my union card. And
okay.
We came out here, and so I came out. The first time I came out here was to be in that movie, but the first time in LA.
So then after that, A League of Their Own comes along somewhere with Penny Marshal.
Yeah. Well, when I first came out here, I met John was really good friends with Rob Reiner. Okay. Yeah, so I arrive in LA. It's so funny because Piven came to pick us up at the airport, and John had bought this '64 convertible black Cadillac. And right, no cell phones. And we walk. Me and Pat come from Chicago. We walk out, and there's Piven in this '64 Cadillac. None of us even had cars in Chicago, and we're like, "What? What is it?" He goes, John just bought it, you know, and he told me to come get you guys to the airport. So my first time coming to LA, I get in a convertible '64 Cadillac and drive to where this beautiful house that they've rented while Cusack makes this movie. And what was so cool about Say Anything was that it was Cameron Crowe's first directing movie, and they stacked the deck, the crew, the producer, all it was really, really, you know, top shelf, and it was really
that's crazy. And
Lily Taylor, you know, and Lily Taylor was in my acting class at the Piven, and so we were in acting class together, and she came to LA to visit, and the agency said, oh, we'll get you these two auditions, Mystic Pizza and Say Anything. Lily Taylor got while we were in acting class, and so she left acting class to become a star and shit.
Man, like you just had a string of like blue chips, and then Renaissance Man.
Well, right, Penny Marshal again. Oh, so one of the first people I met, John was good friends with Rob Reiner, because he was in Stand By Me, and The Sure Thing. So then the first day we spend the next day we get up, he goes, oh, Rob invited us over for lunch. Let's go over to Rob's. So the first day in LA, I'm at Rob Reiner's house having lunch, having like
that's crazy
sandwiches, you know, and again, that guy, may he rest in peace, was just as you would imagine. He was so funny and humble and kind, and he knew how to make John laugh, and John knew how to make him laugh. And you know, when Rob Reiner went to bat for Cusack, had just been in a couple small movies, and Rob knew enough to know, like, wow, he knew talent and knew hard work, and so he chose John to be in Say Anything. Sure Thing, which was his first movie, John's first lead in the movie, and so they were great friends. And Penny, he was married to Penny Marshal at the time, and she had a daughter named Tracy Reiner, who's in one of the girls in League of Their Own.
Right.
And so she was good friends with me, and she became friends, and she'd come visit us in Chicago. And so when Penny came to the Midwest to do League of Their Own, she said, you got to see Spoonie. And so I went. And what was funny is I had a whole, you know, they hired me for a week, and I was in a scene, and so it got cut out of the movie. So here's my Penny Marshal story. So she says, so we shoot this scene, and it's with Gina and what's the other girl's name? The two sisters.
Rosie O'Donnell.
No, her sister. She's a painter now. Lori. Anyway, she's Gina's sister. And the two sisters are the stars of the movie.
Right.
And my character sees them playing baseball and comes out to their farm, and they're like, "Oh God, what's Sweaty Swaley doing here?" That was my character's name. Oh, well, he was at the baseball game today, and essentially my character represented that all the real men were in war, and only the like goony, sweaty guys were left behind, And I was like, "Hey, you want to go on a date?" And Lori Petty, and Lori Petty's like, "No, I don't want to go on a date with you, Sweaty Swaley. Leave me alone," And she walks away, and then I look at Gina like, "You want to go to the movies?" And she's like, "Get away from me," So I was that character, but I loved it. And so down the road, all of a sudden the phone rings one day, again before cell phones, and she's like, "Spoonie, it's Penny Marshal." I said, "Yeah, what?" She said, "Listen, man, I got some bad news. I got all these 9 girls, and one of the girls is Madonna, and I got John Lovitz and Tom Hanks. I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to cut your scene." I said, "Oh, well, Penny, that's fine." And I said, "It was so fun and so cool to be in." She said, "But listen, the scene when you're in the baseball field, that close up?" "Yeah." She goes, "Well, I kept that in there, so you'll get residuals." And so I got, she could have cut me out, but she made the point to keep me in the movie so I could get residuals. And then the next, I moved out here, and she started auditioning for Renaissance Man, and everyone in town auditioned for that.
Oh, I imagine.
And she said, she called me personally. She said, "Listen, I'd like to put you in this movie, but you'd have to dye your hair red." I said, "Penny, I'll grow a fucking tail to be in any movie with you. Whatever it takes." She goes, "So you'll dye?"
Such a classic movie.
Dye my hair to be red to be Wahlberg's first movie.
Crazy. So many cool stories, and then of course Twister. That's another big tentpole film.
Yeah, and those girls were Helen Hunt was so. I mean, all the people that you think are cool. Although I thought Malkovich was cool in there. I just called him an asshole. But the people who you thought were cool were super cool. All those guys were cool, but were super cool. I had a great time on that show.
Yeah, and then The Rock comes along, which is Top Gun for a new generation. I will argue it to the grave. I saw it in the theater.
You did.
Filmed in San Francisco. Talk to me about that. I've heard stories. Go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
What stories have you heard?
Well, I'm curious to know, how much did you film? I mean, there's landmarks. Were you filming at Alcatraz versus in a studio setting?
I mean, well, that was Don Simpson's. So that was Don Simpson's last film.
Jerry Bruckheimer, last film.
And those guys were on such a huge hot streak. And another thing,
hot streak.
Yeah, the thing that makes that movie stand out, the cast and blah blah blah. But again, Jerry would just back up the Brinks truck, and they just pay everyone whatever they needed to, and sure, Sean Connery will for that. And everyone joined. But what was wild was that we were all out there. I mean, we were out there for weeks.
Did you sleep on the island
in the night? I've seen every inch of that. I've had private tour guys go "Here, crawl in this hole," next thing you know, whoa, And so we were out there the whole time. Yeah, that was really something because I almost didn't go on that audition. So it was before the internet, and I didn't know much about the movies, and my manager's and I was going to do a play. I was going to produce this play, and she's like, "Listen, you got to go on this audition. I really hyped you up. It's Jerry Bruckheimer and the director Michael Bay." And I said, "Well, I don't know who those guys are. Who's that?" She goes, "Listen, you might want to read the trades every once in a while, and you're going on this audition, so I'll go." So I go on the audition. And then they say they won't call you back. They want Michael Bay and Jerry Bruckheimer want to meet you. And again, I did this kind of theater that just made me so creative. I wasn't scared of anything, and especially when it was in between action and cut. I mean, it's a free for all. So I never had, and I grew up in a place where, if you didn't know how to cuss somebody out, then you were going to get your fucking lunch money stolen or your bike stolen, or you were going to get called a punk. And so I learned how to cuss somebody out. I never got in a fight, but because I could usually cuss somebody out or crack a joke. Those were my specialties. And so I just didn't hold back. And again, I didn't know who Jerry Bruckheimer or Michael Bay were. And in fact, when Michael Bay is the first time, like, he stood up in the middle of my audition, and I'm auditioning, and he stands up and kind of walks like around me while I'm auditioning, and I just turned to him and delivered like the last 3 lines, like right in his face. And it really freaked him out, but he freaked me out as the actor, because the director never, like, and it never happened. So I wasn't sure what he was doing, but now I realize he was probably looking at, how my face appeared. And so, but the really wild story, here's my rock story. You want to hear?
Yeah, of course.
So I get the part, and we're out there, and again, plenty of time. We had a table reading. Everyone's there. It's all, set to go. And Tony Scott, Candyman is my boy, and Bokeem. I got my, they're backing Captain Fry up. But before that, so the first day of shooting, it was going to be the next day, and they call me. I said, listen, tomorrow, the last day before shooting, they want to see you. They want to do a costume test. Is that okay? So I said, well, yeah. I mean, I'm just sitting around. So yeah. So they put me on the boat. They take me out to the island, and they put me in hair and makeup and my costume. And I just think they're going to take some Polaroids, and all of a sudden, they're like, he's ready here. All of a sudden, there's the first AD. I'm like, hey, well, we'd like you to come down on set. Well, on set, I mean, we're not shooting today, right? We're shooting tomorrow. Well, we got everything all set up. Michael just wants to see you on set. I was like, well, all right. So I go down, and I round the corner, and the whole camera crew set up. The whole thing's lit, like there's lit. And this was like, Schwartzman had, there was like 12 gaffers and 12, there's light. I'm going, oh, what's going on? I said, well, we got excited. We're getting started, and we'd like to just shoot some stuff. I'm like, right now? Yeah. so hand him I said, are you cool with that? Because the starting date wasn't until the next day. I said, well, yeah, I guess if that's what you want to, because and the very first day, the next day, the very first day of shooting The Rock was the day I strangled Nic Cage. And so what I think is that I think they were testing to see if I was gonna be able to handle it, because I was the only guy that, I wasn't really I hadn't had a part like that yet.
That was a pretty big role for you. I mean, you had done a lot of stuff, but you do a lot of things in that movie.
But I never had my hands around the star's throat and threatened him.
So they were probably just seeing, like, so that could have maybe gone a different way for you. Like, had you not had the chutzpah to choke out,
right. And
him.
So, and they handed me and the stuff they asked me to do before put my hands around, the big dramatic scene was tougher as an actor. And you got to come around you come running around the corner, hit your mark, and then look at where is he? And then you run out, and they moved the camera back 3 or 4 times. And I guess he wanted to see if I could handle that stuff first. And then the next day he's like, well, if we got to throw this away, it's no problem. Let's see how he handles Nic Cage. And, and next day I was like, hey, Nick, how are you, man? And we just went at it.
Well, I imagine too, that shower scene, the initial one where General Hummel and you guys are at the top and the other crew is down at the bottom. And there's that huge speech about, that just, I'm telling you, I could talk to you for hours about that movie, but like just the dramatic, I mean, everything about it and sort of the idea of why you guys are doing this, like being a military person, like it, and not recognizing families for what they did and sort of paying tribute properly.
That was the genius of it, is that the bad guy wasn't bad. There was a
No,
bad
I
guy
feel like
amongst
there was
them.
a cause, for what you guys were trying to do. Although you met a horrible demise,
Yeah, yeah. And you know what's
getting
so funny? Like that,
face melting off,
people always ask me what that was. And again, like, oh, I should have said this earlier too, because I think what really makes that movie is that that was before CGI. There was no CGI in
Yeah.
any of that. And so those are the best stunt guys. That was everyone was top notch on that movie, and it really shows. That's why it really holds up, because all that was really, really real.
I
In
think
fact, there's one scene where I'm sitting next to the rocket, and they launch it early, and you could see me like flinch. Like they would do shit like that all the time. But
just
it was really
so
cool.
many iconic lines in that movie. Losers go home and wine, winners go home with the prom queen. Like, just like
We're at Nic
so
Cage. You know what?
many.
I had a line. I spit, and Michael Bay, he was kind of cool. He pushed me a couple times, to try to, because I was a friendly guy, and he had this beautiful assistant, and I was flirting with her, and there was so much testosterone, and I've never been the testosterone guy. Especially when they all get together. I can crack jokes with anyone singularly, but when like 9 guys want to talk about fighting, and I'd much rather flirt with the girls. And so I think he was really worried that I wasn't going to be, menacing enough. And but again,
You were very
cut,
menacing in that movie. Like, just I feel like it was such a great film. Man, what a career you've had. I just tell you, like, you've done some amazing things. So one other question or two here, like, kind of looking back, I mean, you went on to do a bunch of other things after that, a bunch of TV series, some other films. So you have a crazy career. You have a family. Have your kids watched anything that you've done? Are they interested in what dad has done as an actor? Or are they like most children and have very little to no interest in your career?
What I'll tell you what, it's so funny because I moved my family back to my hometown, thinking that it might be good for them to go to high school in the Midwest, and it was unfortunately the only regret I've ever had in my life. Thinking, I mean, you just don't know, and you take the chance. But while we were there for 2 years, and there was so many production people there, and just dying for someone to shoot narrative. Like, there was no,
Right.
It's not easy, And by that time, I was writing enough and had enough ideas and had been in enough movies that there's one guy, he called while we were sitting here from St. Louis, and he essentially has a truck and all the gear and stuff, and makes a living shooting commercials and all kinds of different things. But he said, let's make a short film. So I go to my daughter, who's the oldest, and I said, there's a crew that wants to make a movie. Let's think up a movie. We'll make a one act, a short film. What should it be? She says, well, I'll do it, but I'm going to do it all on my own. I don't want any help. And so I said, well, good luck with that, son. And who was 12? I said, do you want to, let's think, because I used to drive my kids every day to school for 10 years. And we would listen to either music, or we would make up stories. Like, we had these whole worlds that we created on the way to and from school. And so they knew how to tell stories, and we love stories. And so I said, son, what would you want to make a short film? He goes, yeah, I'd be in a short film with you, Dad, but there'd have to be one condition. I said, what's the condition? He goes, well, I'd really want to, I'd want to kick your ass in the movie. I go, oh, okay.
Okay.
Well, I know. Okay, so that's a great idea. Now, how could a 12-year-old, kick a grown man's ass if it's going to be real? Because, yeah, it's got to be real. I said, because, you don't really know any karate or anything. He says, but we could get stunt guys. I said, well, that's good, but why? What, character-wise? And so anyway, we start thinking up this idea, because he loved Robin Hood. And so we thought up this whole Robin Hood thing, where this kid sees this guy who's an asshole, and he keeps coming in contact with his life, until eventually he robs the guy's house. And he goes, yeah, if I could rob your house too. I said, okay. So anyway, we have this short film. It's on YouTube. Go see. It's called Rob in the Hood. And
Okay.
the kid's name is Rob, and I'm the bad guy. And my mom's in it, and my brother's in it, and it's great. It's so and we made it. We shot it in a couple days, and a whole crew helped me edit it. And there's a Steadicam shot in it that, that is incredible. So we had a great time. So, but no, my son is a fashion designer in New York City. He followed his mother's footsteps, who my wife is a clothing designer manufacturer. And
That's cool.
I taught him how to use tools, and then he was a skateboarder, and he wanted to make his own clothes. He said, "Man, I bet you I could make cooler clothes than this." And so we got him a sewing machine, and man, he just went to town. And then he decided he wanted to he loved New York City, so he lives in New York City now.
What a legacy you left, man. Like, I'm just in awe. I really do mean that. Like, I'm not just saying it just for the fact that, like,
I really appreciate it. And I tell you what, it's really helpful now, because it gets hard, and it is hard. But I've been to all the artists out there. I mean, what can we do? I couldn't do anything else. I mean, I can roof a house, but it's not at 62. I can't. So you got to just stay in there and hang in there. And I always did it. I didn't know what else to do. All I did was be an artist. And had I been a little bit smarter or savvier or new to, like who could strangle Nic Cage and shoot a machine gun at Sean Connery and then take Phoebe on a date? Like, someone should have helped me. I should have either had a TV show or been the best bad guy in town.
I know. I mean, Friends, Murphy Brown. I mean, just like
back in those days, it was just like, okay, a Friday, I'm going to Murphy Brown. Now, who could I be? What guy could I be? Or what if he was this guy? I'll wear the beret. And next thing you know, that became, because in Chicago it was like, it was theater, and so you had an audience. So now that I didn't have an audience, I'd be like, okay, Friday I get to go see the Murphy Brown people. That'll be the performance. And so these auditions became the play, and so I would build up, and and so that was the only way, that's how I got jobs, because that's how I.
And you have consistently worked for years, and I think probably because you're kind, you're easy to work with, and you were smart, and you were bankable, like, and I think, like I said before we started recording, I've had the privilege to talk to so many cool people like yourself, but this ranks up there as one of my favorite conversations, because
cool.
It really is true, like, because you just, like, all these cool movies that you did and TV shows, and like, you were, I think a perfect bow is to tie is you were born an artist, and you did it, and like, it was in your blood, like Jake Busey said, it's like it's this group of vagabonds that just went from place to place to place, and you just worked. And thank you for being this is your first interview. It's great. I think this is funny, because people will see this and go, "Oh, well, let me try and get him."
Like, you know what I'm looking for, though? I'm getting ready to try. I've written scripts, but I got a really good script. I'm getting ready to make a movie in my hometown, and that's what I'm gearing up for. And that's why I was like, wow, maybe this is not that I'm soliciting a producer, but the idea of talking about the artist's life, and because my movie's about the birth of an artist, and
there you go. You never know. Like, cool, man. Well, thanks for saying yes. And to your team, I had worked with somebody else, and I was just kind of going through Eric Stolhansky for Super Troopers. And I was just kind of looking through people, and I was like, hey, I emailed her, Tammy, and I said, I haven't seen like him do much interview stuff, if any. I was like, does he do them? Some people don't, like, they just don't have any interest in it, or maybe it's because they're just promoting something and they're like, okay, sure. But to have somebody like you who's done it for so long and had so many different iconic type characters, I was like, please ask him if he's interested. Again, just like, thank you for your time, man. Like, it's been an honor chatting with you, and like, I appreciate your time, and it's been an honor.
I appreciate your time too, and getting and sitting down with people and hearing some good stories. So I'm wishing you the best of luck. Good luck out there, people. Hang in there, artists.
Yeah, absolutely. Hang in